The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Russia is now threatening to confiscate American assets abroad. Western powers are increasing pressure on Russia to talk to the new government in Kiev and to really try to ease tensions in the area. And there is significant international displeasure with Russia's military intervention in Ukraine's Crimea region. Now, Russia has been warned that they could be sanctioned, and that when European Union leaders meet tomorrow in Brussels, Belgium, there could realistically be sanctions slapped on them if there is no progress in ending these escalating tensions. But these measures might not just hurt Russia. There's a bit of a tit for tat going on, where Russian lawmakers are drafting a law which would allow Russia to confiscate assets belonging to US and European companies if sanctions are slapped on Moscow, according to Russian state media. The diplomatic maneuvers are coming as world leaders are meeting in Paris for talks that were originally intended to focus on Lebanon, but instead it seems like Ukraine is going to dominate that agenda as well now, in advance of tomorrow's discussions in Belgium. Russian forces still controlling parts of Crimea, the Black Sea Peninsula, where Russia has a large naval base. And this, I'm in thinking about this, the U.S. should take a backseat role, certainly participating in the talks, but issuing less ultimatums for the time being. We saw when Secretary of State Kerry made that statement about you can't just invade other countries on a trumped up pretext. That didn't go that well because the U.S. has a long history of doing exactly that. That being said, I'm not someone who thinks the U.S. should be playing no role at all. The U.S. should play the same role as all of the other countries involved in negotiations. But I think that it's hard to imagine a more positive outcome coming from more active U.S. involvement right now. And we, of course, realize that part of Vladimir Putin's thing is to not do what the U.S. wants him to do. So I actually think if we're speaking pragmatically, less active involvement from the U.S. is better right now for easing tensions.
Right. I think it should probably just stop it at condemning the actions of Russia. Trying to threaten Russia, issuing ultimatums, and bullying, if you will, is pretty counterproductive.
Sarah Palin is taking the tense situation in Russia and Ukraine as an opportunity to talk about how good she is at predicting stuff and how great her foreign policy credentials are, and it's completely bogus and wrong. It is true that back during the 2008 presidential campaign, Sarah Palin said that President Obama's, quote, indecision and moral equivalence in response to Russia's invasion of the Republic of Georgia, quote, would only encourage Russia's Putin to invade Ukraine next. Now, this was a few seconds after she mocked President Obama for, quote, sending our military into Pakistan without the approval of the Pakistani government. And she now has posted, given what has actually transpired in Ukraine, she posted on her Facebook page a few days ago, quote, I could see this one from Alaska. I'm usually not one to told you so, but I did. That had 71,000 likes on her Facebook page. Now, yes, Russia today is criticizing President Obama's foreign policy agenda, and they are occupying part of Ukraine. But Sarah Palin wasn't right. It is clear that Palin suggested Russia might invade Ukraine. She certainly did not predict it, and this is really the key part. It didn't happen because of how President Obama reacted when Russia entered the Republic of Georgia in 2008. President Obama wasn't even president when that happened in 2008. And Mark Brawley, who's a professor of international relations at McGill University, said, her exact words were not exactly a prediction, but a comment that suggests it raised the probability that Putin would act against Ukraine in the future. When fighting did break out between Russia and Georgia, both President Obama and John McCain condemned the violence and President Obama told reporters Russia has escalated its military campaign through strategic bombing and the movement of its ground forces into the heart of Georgia. There is no possible justification for these attacks. And presidential candidate McCain was quicker to blame Russia than President Obama. So let's cut to the chase, okay? Does Sarah Palin's suggestion of a possible future event couched as being President Obama's fault if it happens cause you to desire Sarah Palin in a foreign policy making decision position? I mean, this to me shouldn't change anyone's view of Sarah Palin's foreign policy credentials. I don't know if it has affected your view, Lewis.
No, I never really thought there were any foreign policy credentials to begin with. I just think it's kind of funny. I mean, it's not like no one could have predicted a future conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, that's, I think, something that was likely to begin with.
Well, this would be like if the Bible vaguely predicts future strife between nations, turning over our society to biblical doctrine. Oh, wait a second. Actually, there's actually a lot of people in this country who would want to do exactly that, both voters and elected officials. Maybe that's a really bad analogy for me to be making.
You know, if only Sarah Palin had this much foresight about her chances at being vice president, maybe she could have predicted that someone would have asked her what magazine she would read.
Maybe she would have been able to list one thing that she reads. Yeah, it's certainly not exactly not exactly a bold prediction from Sarah Palin. Hillary Clinton is now equating Vladimir Putin to Adolf Hitler in some specific ways. Hillary Clinton equated recent actions by Russian President Vladimir Putin in Ukraine to Adolf Hitler's desire to protect ethnic Germans outside of Germany. So to give you some background, Vladimir Putin has been on a campaign to give Russian passports to anyone who has Russian connections, according to Hillary Clinton. The Russian leader has done this in the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea, which Hillary Clinton says is similar to what happened in Nazi Germany in the late 1930s, where Hitler resettled tens of thousands of ethnic Germans who were living in parts of Europe to Nazi Germany. And Clinton made her comments in a private event meant to benefit the Boys and Girls Club of Long Beach. And here's a quote. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's what Hitler did back in the 30s. All the Germans that were the ethnic Germans, the Germans by ancestry who were in places like then Czechoslovakia and Romania and other places, Hitler kept saying they're not being treated right. I must go and protect my people. And that's what's gotten everybody so nervous. I rarely find comparisons or equations of Hitler to anything else relevant nor enlightening, and this is actually no different. And the most interesting aspect of this is that this flare-up with Russia is putting conservatives in a really weird position where they're kind of starting to defend some of Vladimir Putin's actions, but at the same time, they don't really like Russia, and it's all centered around opposing people like Hillary Clinton and President Obama. Now, the comparison that Hillary Clinton makes is historically accurate, right? These are the same rationales of, quote, protecting ethnically or culturally related groups that Hitler advanced, and it's at odds with reality. The claims that ethnic Germans were being oppressed and needed the protection were blatant lies, in the same way that Vladimir Putin's claims that Russians all over Europe are being oppressed, and particularly in Ukraine. There is a similarity. However, in wondering what purpose this really serves, I don't really think it advances anything constructive. In other words, even if there is a historical analogy to be made there, I don't think Hillary Clinton equating Vladimir Putin or his ideals to those of Hitler will be constructive in any way, and therefore I still think it's a mistake.
It's the opposite of constructive. This is basically fear-mongering. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, a lot of people make Hitler comparisons just for shock value to try and get attention. And
this one I don't think is that. There is a historical parallel here. I just still don't think it advances anything.
Okay, there's a historical parallel, but I'm sure you could find hundreds of examples of this in other countries from other points in time. It really has nothing to do with the Third Reich and what Adolf Hitler was ultimately trying to accomplish, right?
No, there's no rule that makes it so that the only comparison you can make is to Hitler, and I think that it was a mistake by Hillary Clinton to do this. It's possible these comments were not meant to be public, but even still, if you're doing it at a fundraising event, you have to understand that they may become public. At the same time, maybe she wasn't thinking that they were private comments. This is crazy. The crazy from Florida continues. A man who's being identified, this is so absurd, only as Mr. Hayes, is flying a Ku Klux Klan flag in Boca Raton, Florida. A reporter from Local 10 spoke with Mr. Hayes and asked, "Why do you have a KKK sign that says members wanted on it?" And he said, "Well, as many people know, the white families are producing less children because the mother and father work. And you have these interracial marriages and gay marriages, so there are less and less white children being born every day, and we're against that." He says that flying the flag is about freedom of speech. Oh boy, here we go again with the freedom of speech confusion. He went on to say, hey, nobody stops the Puerto Ricans from flying a Puerto Rican flag or the Jews from wearing yarmulkes or whatever it is during the holidays. Now, of course, this is a ridiculous comparison. Mr. Hayes may not be swayed by logic, but I will tell you that the KKK flag, unlike the Puerto Rican flag or a yarmulke, is not related to a nationality nor a religion. It's a flag related to a hate group seeking to affirm its white racial dominance and white supremacy. So the analogy is bogus. Mr. Hayes, I can't believe I'm calling him that. That's the only name we have for him. Mr. Hayes claims that the response to the flag has actually been overwhelmingly positive. He says, we don't get anybody throwing bottles on the lawn or anything like that. They toot their horn, they stop, they wave, they take pictures. He also has a noose hanging in his front yard, but he says the noose is not at all about condoning violence, no, because the KKK doesn't do that. He said, and this comment really calmed my concerns that this guy might be racist or anti-gay or anti-black. He said, we don't go around committing hate crimes. We don't beat up on faggots or black people or burn crosses or any of that nonsense. I'm glad he cleared that up. Now that he told us that the KKK doesn't beat up faggots, I think that this is a perfectly upstanding citizen doing just nothing but expressing his sovereign free speech rights.
Yeah, there's, I mean, this is all over the place in Florida, all over the place in this country, really. But Florida just seems to have a higher concentration of nonsense like this.
Yeah. So are you satisfied, Lewis, by him saying that this is both the noose and the KKK flag are not at all indications of any kind of discrimination or violence?
Well, I guess we have to take him at his word that he doesn't go around beating people up, at least not until he does. But I still consider him to be incredibly racist and bigoted. Of course, how could you not?
I'd love to talk to some of the people he says are waving and beeping their horns and just thrilled with what he's doing. Those are neighbors I would like to talk to in Boca Raton, Florida. I actually have like a great aunt by marriage who lives in Boca Raton, Florida. And I wonder what she would think of this. I wonder if she's one of the people cheerleading. Somehow, I think not. Let's take a break. Coming up today, we have Hatriot Mail. We will talk about self-professed homosexuality and so much more. Glad you're with us on a Wednesday. Big show coming up today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
You can, of course, support the David Pakman Show with the shopping you already plan to do on Amazon.com by first visiting our website, davidpakman.com. Click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the website, bookmark that link, and just use it whenever you shop. There will never be a form to fill out or anything different, but when you check out, Amazon sends us a percentage of your purchase. which is yet another way to support our show with your purchases. You can also become a member of The David Pakman Show, which is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because conservatives know you reduce the abortion rate by keeping birth control away from women while teaching abstinence-only sex education. Doesn't that sound unbiased to you? Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's member of the day is John Hickey. John, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Not only can you join John at davidpakman.com/membership, but you can get a free t-shirt for the next few days by signing up for membership on this specific page, davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT, davidpakman.com/Reddit. That will also get you entered in our dozen items giveaway happening on March 31st. We'll be giving away everything from David Pakman Show microphones to banners to custom t-shirts. So check that out, davidpakman.com/Reddit. Today's Hatriot Mail is a very interesting Hatriot Mail.
If Ayn Rand and Ronald Reagan had a baby and suckled that child off the teat of liberty, its cries would sound a little something like Patriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
This Hatriot Mail introduces a term I've never heard before. The term is wine queer. Lewis, have you ever heard the term wine queer before? Don't answer now. First, let's listen to Hatriot Mail, and then we will try to make sense of what a wine queer is. I don't know.
Do you think you are sort of a book-smart, refined, intelligent? To me, you are just a wine queer. You go on and on about anti-establishment, while you establish you are a loser. Go back to your day job, you commie Jew. Look at that stupid haircut and that wine face. Boy, if I could wipe that smirk off it. Your other guy is you're a subservient sex slave, isn't he?
Yeah.
He lick your bottom for his position at your feet? Typical Democrat Clowan. How you have fans is a misery. Your eyes are slanted. Are you some sort of druggie? Does your mommy dress you in the morning? Your show is not even that. It is just a guy sharing his stupid opinion and not facts like more renowned shows such as Fox News.
Yeah, this is an epic Hatriot Mail. Let's try to take it in smaller pieces if we can. Wine queer. Have you ever heard that term before?
I have never heard of it, and I can only imagine it means a queer who drinks wine.
So let's
right?
take it in pieces. Yeah. I'm not gay personally, so I think that makes me not queer. I don't really like wine. If I have to drink wine, I'll have white wine, but red wine to me is just like poison. The smell and the taste, which I guess are the two most important things, really I don't like. So that we've kind of gotten out of the way. My mom doesn't dress me in the morning. I live in New York City and she lives in Massachusetts, so it'd be tough to logistically make that happen. And what other issues were addressed? This is an opinion show. They were right about that. However, I don't think that saying Fox News is what we should aspire to be is, that's not something that I can really get behind. Is that everything from the, I think we've addressed each point.
That and I'm not your sex slave.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Lewis is not my sex slave. And yeah, so that is the last one. That one was so crazy, I thought it went without saying, but it's always best to really clear these up explicitly to avoid confusion. So there it is, Hatriot Mail for today. That's one of the best ones ever so far. I have no doubt at all. We've talked about Republican Congressman from Iowa, Steve King, before, and he was on Des Moines WHO TV recently talking about the Arizona SB 1062 anti-gay bill that Republican Governor Jan Brewer vetoed. And he says that we can't have protections for being gay because being gay is self-professed behavior. What does that mean? Let's listen, let's watch together and see if we can figure it out.
Although it's clear in the civil rights section of the code that you can't discriminate against people based upon, I'm not sure I've got the list right, but race, creed, religion, color of skin, those kind of things. And there's nothing mentioned in there on self-professed behavior, and that's what they're trying to perfect, is special rights for self-professed behavior. And I think it's difficult for us to define a law that would protect behavior. And but the one thing that I reference when I say self-professed is, how do you know who to discriminate against? They about have to tell you. And are they then setting up a case? And is this about bringing a grievance, or is it actually about a service that they'd like to have? And
okay, so what he's saying is, if someone tells you they're gay, it's self-professed in the sense that they might not be gay, and then they could just say they are gay if they were refused service, even though they might have been refused service for something else. In other words, when you look at someone, you don't really know for sure whether they're gay or not. They might be gay, they might be straight, they could lie about it. Well, is there anything more self-professed than religious membership? How could you argue that you can't have protections for sexual orientation because it is self-professed, yet religious protections are okay? Religion is completely self-professed. If I tell you I'm a Christian and I've accepted Jewish carpenter in the sky, Jesus Christ, as my Lord and Savior, who are you to tell me that I haven't? It is completely self-professed, yet I'm afforded all sorts of convenient legal protections as a result of that self-professed idea.
Yeah, it seems like quite the legal quandary. I guess you just have to either give those protections to everyone or no one, right?
And of course, what Steve King is missing is that there's nothing wrong as a business owner for discriminating against someone for their behavior in your establishment, right? So this fear that has been presented by the anti-gay right of, well, if I start baking gay wedding cakes, all of a sudden gay dudes will be having sex in my establishment and I won't be able to tell them to get out. No, because presumably you don't allow anybody to have sex in your establishment. I don't think it matters whether they want a gay wedding cake or a straight wedding cake. This idea that once sexual orientation is protected, it's just an orgy in all businesses is, number one, incredibly offensive and perpetrates this stereotype that there is no discrimination at all. Let me use a different word because that may be confusing. That gay people don't have any standards as to who they have sex with, in direct contrast to straight people who, of course, do. Putting aside the offensive nature of that, the idea that people are just constantly trying to have sex at businesses is very silly.
Yeah, this is something that comes up a lot. It's the idea of usually homosexuals just partaking in this ludicrous sexual behavior all over the place, anywhere they can, every time they can, with multiple people.
Right.
And it's the first thing that comes to mind when anyone's trying to quash their rights. And I don't know why that always comes up.
No, it's very strange. It's almost like the bigots are obsessed with gay male sex for some reason. I can't imagine why that would be. So anyway, there's Steve King on self-professed behavior, like choosing your religion. Another interesting comment from a Republican official: Texas Republicans are unrepentant after a prominent member of their caucus referred to same-sex couples as sodomites and said that the nation's founders would be appalled that they are being allowed to marry. This is according to Houston's KHOU, and it involves conservative Republicans of Texas President Dr. Steve Hotsey, who made the bigoted remarks in a press release supporting Harris County Republican Party Chairman Jared Woodfill, who is running for re-election. Here is the quote from the fundraising letter. Dr. Hotsey: "Our founding fathers would be furious to find out that the Constitution was being interpreted to allow sodomites to marry." When asked by KHOU about the remarks, he didn't back down. He said, "I don't know how I could be any clearer. This whole issue is about judicial liberal activism that is trying to redefine marriage." Okay, so let's take this step by step. If we're going to base all of today's law on what the founding fathers would or would not be okay with, would the founding fathers have been in favor of interracial marriage? I don't think so. Did the founding fathers write the Constitution to allow the space program the interstate highway, the public school system, clean water regulation, mandatory meat inspections, fire departments, television, the internet, the FCC? No. Didn't the founding fathers fight a revolution to get out from under the oppression of religious conservatism? Yes, but you wouldn't know it from how right-wing conservatives today talk about the founding fathers.
No, everyone's an expert and everyone knows exactly what the founding fathers meant as if they knew them personally. I mean, we knew what they fought against. We knew why they came to this country. That's pretty much where it ends. I don't know how they come to these conclusions.
Every time the founding fathers and the Constitution are brought up, I don't think that we shouldn't care about the Constitution or the founding fathers, but to suggest that we don't need to adjust for the fact that the Constitution was written hundreds of years ago, when so many of the things and processes and systems that exist today would be indistinguishable from magic to those who wrote the Constitution. How can anybody honestly argue that we need a literal interpretation of the Constitution? And even if we were able to perfectly ascertain the 100% definitive intention of the founding fathers, who can really argue that that's exactly what we should be sticking to in modern society?
Yeah, of course. I mean, things change. Things are always changing. And many countries around the world embrace that change and change their, I don't know, constitutional equivalents, right?
The other thing, to go back to the marriage part, Lewis, is that the whole myth about so-called traditional marriage, modern marriage has really only been around since, I don't know, the early 1900s, right? This entire concept of engagements and engagement rings and diamonds, which of course we can look at the diamond industry very much for that, and one man, one woman. The idea that just over all of history, the only types of domestic partnership arrangements that have existed are one man married to one woman are ludicrous. Whether we're talking about the Bible, whether we're talking about ancient European societies, whatever it is, we have instances of polygamy, men in multiple individual marriages, three-way marriages, gay relationships. I mean, the idea that what was determined in the 1940s or 50s to be the right way to do marriage as the law for the rest of time is very childish.
It is, and people just keep going back and saying, well, this is what the founding fathers meant. This is their documentation, and it's kind of like the Holy Grail for them, and it can't be changed. It can't be reinterpreted. Well, there have already been changes and additions, so I don't think that that's a good argument anymore.
Coming up next, Congressman Steve Stockman threatened to arrest anyone who publishes a mugshot from when he was arrested. We will show you that mugshot next. Also, don't miss our Patreon page, patreon.com/David Pakman, patreon.com/David Pakman. This is the best way to support the work we are doing day in and day out on our YouTube channel.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Melissa Ringhart was a 19-year-old babysitter who admitted that she was high on marijuana when a 5-year-old boy she was babysitting shot himself to death with her handgun. She has now been sentenced, and the sentence is 4 years of probation. She was sentenced after pleading guilty to endangering a child, a state jail felony, and Judge Burgess sentenced Ringhart to 2 years in a state jail and a $1,000 fine. However, that sentence was instantly suspended, and instead Ringhart was given 4 years of probation. She won't go to jail at all, assuming she follows the terms of her probation. In October of 2013, she was watching a 5-year-old, his name's John Reed, and a 6-month-old child at the parents' home, and investigators said that she left a handgun on a living room table before going to take a nap. When she woke up, she found Reed dead with a bullet wound in the head, 5 years old. She was arrested the next day. The arrest warrant affidavit said that she was intoxicated throughout the day and left a .40 caliber handgun on a coffee table while she went to take a nap. She told authorities the reason she had the gun in the first place was that she was afraid of being alone in this home while babysitting. There was no phone in the home, so the babysitter had to physically carry the dead child to his grandparents' home, where authorities were called. The question, I think, the emails, in case you can't tell from the story, the emails I've gotten about the story are that the sentence is not a fair sentence, 4 years of probation. The question is whether the sentence is justice for the victim or the victim's families, right? When someone gets 5 years for nonviolent drug offenses, who are the victims and is justice being served? When the intoxicated babysitter allows a 5-year-old to shoot himself dead with her gun, a negligent act, and she gets 4 years probation, is that justice, and will it prevent her from doing it again? This is not about saying we need to just lock people up longer. That's never been the position of this program. It's about wondering whether the sentence is justice for victims and will prevent similar future acts. And I don't know that it does either of those things.
This sentence certainly does not. If it were me, I would put her in prison for life.
Really? Well, I don't know that the law really calls for that. That seems maybe a little extreme because, again, it is she didn't murder someone, and it's not even really manslaughter, although certainly she was negligent and allowed someone to kill themselves.
If you do not harshly punish those who negligently use firearms, this will keep happening. It happens all the time. The punishments aren't severe enough. People need to know that they are going to be locked away for a very long time if they do something this incredibly stupid.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just not thinking life in prison. It'd be hard for me to justify that in the context of what sentences are. But certainly, you know, I don't think 12 to 15 years would be crazy, or maybe even 20 for this crime.
At the very least, David. I mean, also, I mean, I just hate the idea of someone this fundamentally stupid walking around in the same country as me. Although I know there are millions of them, it still bothers me a lot.
American evangelical Christian minister David Barton, who's also a conservative activist and author, was having a discussion with a guy named Mike Jacobs, and the topic of theocracy came up. Specifically, David Barton addressed the fear that some have that the religious right in the United States wants to implement a Christian theocracy in the United States. Of course, this is backed by story after story of attempts from lawmakers to make law based on specific teachings of their religion, whether it's gay marriage or abortion or research or education around science. How does David Barton describe a theocracy? How does he define a theocracy? Yeah, this isn't exactly what I would have said, but this is what David Barton said.
What is a theocracy? A theocracy is a government that God runs. As long as you have elections, you'll never have a theocracy. So the notion that if Christians get in power or Christians get involved, it's going to be a theocracy, that is stupidity. Yeah. Because as long as the people are choosing their own leaders at every level, you cannot have a government where God comes in and imposes it. And so this far left stuff that says, oh, for Christians to get involved, they're trying to make a theocracy. No, we're choosing our leaders.
If there are elections, regardless of who the choices are, of the fairness or validity of the election, or anything else, if you have elections, if you nominally have something called an election, then it is not a theocracy. Now, how does this compare with the actual definition of theocracy? Let's explore. Theocracy is a form of government in which a deity is officially recognized as the civil ruler and official policy is governed by officials regarded as divinely guided, or is pursuant to the doctrine of a particular religion or religious group. Abundantly clear that according to that second definition, if you have a system of laws where biblical opposition to stem cell research, gay marriage, and abortion is part of the reasoning for those laws, you have theocratic laws and theocratic government. Now, what countries currently are theocracies? Well, we've got Iran, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Yemen, Afghanistan, the United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, Malaysia, Mauritania. The Islamic Republic of Iran has elections. Does David Barton agree that it is not a theocracy?
I guess you'd have to ask him. I'm not really sure. His definition clearly is not the actual definition. But I don't know. I guess when God is talking to you and telling you things, what is in a dictionary doesn't really matter.
We should also explain to David Barton that the left doesn't fear that all Christians want a theocracy. Most of them don't, right? We think people like David Barton and his buddies and his ilk want a theocracy, but most Americans, regardless of whether they are religious or not, don't actually want a theocracy. And maybe Barton hasn't heard of Vatican City and how they have elections and they have a religious leader as their head of state. I guess he hasn't heard about that one either.
I wouldn't expect this guy to be too well brushed up on what's going on around the world. But I mean, I will say, I agree most Americans don't want a theocracy, but there is still a huge number of Christians in this country who essentially do want a theocracy and do want to strictly elect those who they believe are representing God.
Oh, no question. Because of the population of this country, we still have a huge number in the absolute sense of people who do want a Christian theocracy in this country. However, it is a minority percentage-wise, although it seems to be much higher if you look at actual elected officials, but that's kind of a different story. Next, that mugshot that Congressman Steve Stockman said would get media types arrested.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Back in 1977, Texas Republican Congressman Steve Stockman spent a little weekend in jail for traffic violations. And while he was there, his jailers discovered that the then 20-year-old actually, future politician, had Valium in his underpants. Really an odd thing. Now, since Stockman was arrested, of course, there's a mugshot, and he's very upset that the mugshot is on the internet thanks to a political action committee. And he's actually running against John Cornyn because, according to Stockman, Cornyn isn't conservative enough. As funny as that is, in order to appeal to the lowest common denominator of conservative voters, it would help his whole Valium in the underwear thing to kind of erase it from history. And the entire mugshot is not helping that. It did actually happen, of course, the whole story, but a Stockman spokesman now is claiming it didn't. According to Danny Ferguson, unnamed Michigan officials, whoever they are, have told Stockman that this is all a big mistake. Ferguson wrote on Stockman's website, Michigan's 43rd Judicial District clerk stated Stockman was never convicted of any charge, and the documents were supposed to have been destroyed back in 1978. Another Michigan official has advised Stockman he has grounds to file criminal complaints against any person or media organization that publishes the documents. What's interesting is that Stockman himself spoke about the entire incident, which now supposedly never happened, during an interview in 1995. And Stockman told the Dallas Morning News that his girlfriend hid Valium in his underwear and he got charged with it. How in the world would a girlfriend hide Valium in his underwear without him knowing it?
Underwear that he's wearing, right?
That he's wearing, or even if she like slips it in, did she tape it inside the underwear in a way that's not even visible and he wouldn't feel when he puts the underwear on? It's one of the most outrageous defenses I've ever heard.
Yeah. Oh, it's complete bull. You have to be able to come up with something better than that. But how can you when you have a Valium in your underwear?
To give you a little bit of background about Steve Stockman, he took his best buddy Ted Nugent to the State of the Union address. He's threatened numerous times to file articles of impeachment against President Obama. He's compared President Obama to Saddam Hussein. He's defended a militia group. He appeared on a Holocaust-denying radio program. And he's also been investigated by the FEC. So anyway, this is the mugshot, which he says he really is going to take very seriously if people publish. Everybody's been publishing it. I don't really expect any trouble, though, Lewis. Mugshots are in the public domain, aren't they?
Yeah, I welcome this. I hope he tries to come after us because that will just be great for the show, I think.
I think it would be the best thing to ever happen to the show if he tries to get us arrested for publishing the mugshot. Glenn Beck is now begging God not to let him be right anymore. He was talking about a case where the Supreme Court initially denied an appeal by a German family seeking asylum in the U.S. The reason the German family is seeking asylum in the U.S. is that Germany does not let them homeschool, and Glenn Beck is absolutely outraged, and he's putting together the theory that homeschooling will be outlawed altogether in the United States, and then he begs God not to let him be right this time.
That's what this is. I'm telling you with everything in me. Do not, please, dear God, do not make me right on this one. Please don't let me be right on this one. But everything in me tells me that's what this story is about. Making sure they shut down. Dear God, stop being right. Can we stop being right now? Please. I don't want to be right anymore.
It turns out Glenn Beck was actually wrong this time. Shortly after the broadcast, the family was determined to be allowed to stay in the U.S. permanently, although they did lose the specific asylum appeal. Listening to Glenn Beck plead not to be right anymore, you would think he's right all the time, and with all of the predictions that he makes on his show. So we look back, and 5 years ago, John Richardson wrote about what Glenn Beck thought American life would look like this year in 2014. Here were Glenn Beck's predictions about 2014. All banks will have been nationalized. They haven't. Unemployment will be 12 to 20%. It's around 7. The Dow Jones Industrial Average will be at 2,800. It's at a record high of 16,000. Government and unions will control most businesses. The government doesn't, and unions have smaller membership than ever. There are many more. Hasn't he made even more recently predictions that are also bogus?
Well, he's making predictions all the time. I mean, a lot of the time they're very vague so that he can go back and say, well, what I meant was this.
Right. Yeah, the revisionist history on predictions is a kind of a key point from a lot of these right-wingers.
Yeah. So just more nonsense from Glenn Beck. I don't know how anyone can listen to this guy.
Well, it is entertaining, though, isn't it? Between his delivery and the absurdity of what he says, it's fun to watch in small doses.
I don't know. I mean, we're shocked by it, and we find it appalling. It's like a train wreck for us. But there are people who listen to it and are taking everything that he says literally and thinking, wow, this guy is a brilliant, deep thinker and a great religious, God-fearing man, whatever.
We've got some great voicemails for you today. 219-2-DAVID-P is our voicemail number. We haven't heard from frequent caller Gordon lately. Gordon just casually asking for a little bit of advice. Let's listen to Gordon.
Hi, this is Gordon, David. I was going to ask you if you have web addresses to any live streams to Rio de Janeiro's Carnival to me or email it to me. So I could see it. I've been looking for that, but I can't seem to find it.
Yeah.
I know they're there, but I just don't know where they are. And so I've been looking on Google. I'm not too much because I can't spend too much time with that. So this is Gordon in Oregon.
Unfortunately, Gordon, I don't have that much time to look for Brazilian live streams either, but I don't know of any offhand. But if you need anything else, just let me know. And here is one more voicemail on Venezuela.
Hey, David and Lewis. This is Erin from Southern California. I just have to say, your guys' coverage on Venezuela is very well done. I can tell that you guys really put a lot of work into it, and that you guys really understand what's going on. Because every time I listen to your show, you seem to explain it to the point where I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. And anytime I'm talking to somebody about what's happening in Venezuela, they seem really out of the loop. They don't seem to understand. I throw out issues. I say things about stuff, and they're like, where are you getting this information at all? So you guys keep up the good work.
Thank you. Wow, a very positive voicemail about our Venezuela coverage. We're going to be putting out like a 15 or 20-minute very detailed video on Venezuela that won't be part of the broadcast show because it's a bit long, but it will be on YouTube. I will let you know when that happens. It is going to explore a lot of the specific issues in Venezuela in much more detail. On today's bonus show, a hilarious study on Americans' knowledge of tech terminology. We will also talk about the crime dog actor getting sentenced for pot and weapon possession. And we've got a bunch of great voicemails from our members for the bonus show. For details about membership, go to davidpakman.com/membership, or for the next few days, davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. Talk to you in a few minutes on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.